Doug is a businessman, political activist, basically Republican, but one that doesn't carry any antagonism towards the Democratic Party. He's got a lot of friends in both parties. He's really a very, very interesting guy. He traveled with me extensively all across the country, both in my presidential campaign for other things that we cared a lot about. And he's a great friend. He's not above telling me when he thinks I'm wrong, which avoids the issue of groupthink. But he's also an effusive and strong supporter of myself and my family. So we really appreciate him being with us. And Doug always finds himself in the middle of things that are really interesting, and particularly big projects. And one of the big projects, of course, is 250. And Doug is the chairman of the project here in Ohio. Doug, tell us a little bit about what 250 is, how you got in the middle of this, and what do you hope to achieve?
Well, thanks very much, Governor. Delightful to be with you today, and thanks for your warm words. I'm very, very excited to be chairing the Ohio Semi-Quincentennial Commission. But of course, we're calling it America 250 Ohio because that's a mouthful. And every state and the territories have this all over the country. Of course, most Americans are aware by now that it's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So there's things going on at the national level. Every state and territory are doing their own thing. So the country is united in a lot of ways in this celebration. And I am very excited to be in the middle of it here in Ohio. And we've been involved around the country somewhat, too. When the current governor asked me to do this, I was humbled and delighted because I happen to be an 8th generation descendant of a signer of the Declaration of Independence from New Jersey. So it's a special treat for me.
Well, who was that, Doug?
John Hart, known as the signer, and he was a farmer and a legislator from New Jersey. He was in the Second Continental Congress. So he was there along with the more famous signers, Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, and the rest. And he was a signer. The British invaded his farm. He was forced to live in a cave in the woods for a while. That broke his health, and he died not long thereafter. He did not survive to see the end of the revolution, but he was a patriot. You and I were talking, an interesting story I just learned from a family report. He was reading from the book of Isaiah to his wife when a farmhand burst in and told him the British are invading the farm, and the candle tipped over when he jumped up. It burned parts of Isaiah out of the family Bible, and you can still see this family Bible over in New Jersey.
Huh. Okay, so the governor of Ohio calls you in. He says, how did it go? What did he say you were going to do?
He said, we want Ohio to be at the forefront, and we think we are. We have a 29-member commission, and we were charged with the planning, execution, celebration of those things that make Ohio great in the middle of the last 250 years. Of course, Ohio hasn't been a state that long, but we did figure in the revolution. There was revolutionary activity and a fort here in what would become Ohio, the Great West at that time. All the other states are doing this too, and as you can imagine, the original 13 states on the East Coast are the most organized and excited about what's going on, to remember the Declaration and the residents. It still has today those amazing and challenging words in the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. I mean, that has resounded for 250 years, not only in this country, but around the world, inspiring generations to pursue equality, to pursue acceptance, to pursue civil rights and equal rights. Those 1,300 words, unparalleled in the history of the world, still resonate today. And we got to remind ourselves of it all across the country, why that's important.
Well, tell us a little bit about how this committee that you have, it's a large committee, how have you decided what your priorities are going to be? And then talk about a few of your priorities.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a 29-member commission in Ohio. A lot of states have done it differently. In some cases, the state history department's running it. In other places, it's just one or two folks. Here, the legislature created a standalone commission of 29 folks, and then we doubled the size of it with activists from every walk of life across the state, who are co-chairs of our working committees, everything from trails and tales to celebrate uniting interesting places and things throughout history in Ohio. I think you're aware we're doing Ohio Goes to the Movies. People, I think, would be interested to be reminded that Thomas Edison, so famous in New Jersey, the Wizard of Menlo Park, he was born and raised in Ohio, filmed some of the first films. He created the first working camera, motion picture camera, in this side of the Atlantic, and made films in Cleveland, Ohio. Then later moved to New Jersey, and of course, not there long thereafter, Hollywood became Hollywood, named by a woman from Northeast Ohio who went out to California to found a little burg with her husband. They called it Hollywood. So we're celebrating all year long. We're planting trees as a lasting memorial in every of Ohio's 88
Well,
counties.
let's stay on the movies before you move on to some of the rest of us. So, tell us where is this going to happen? In Cleveland? Is it going to be in an auditorium? How are people going to find out about it if they want to go?
Our website, Ohio America 250 Ohio, has an extensive listing, and we've created a one-of-a-kind booklet that shows not only actors and actresses for the last 120 years of filmmaking, but producers, makeup artists, Academy Award winners, and every county, all 88 counties, has some link to the great movie industry, which is an American phenomenon in so many ways. And Ohio was and remains at the center of it. Steven Spielberg is from Cincinnati. Tom Hanks, though not from Ohio, got his start in local theater in Cleveland. Everybody knows about the Warner Brothers. Guess where they were from? Youngstown. There's still a Warner Theater up there. So we're celebrating the Wicked Witch of the West from Ohio, Margaret Hamilton. So kids still watch The Wizard of Oz, even though it's...
So is there going to be one day when you're going to unveil all these movies, or how's it going to work?
Every community and historic theaters on the sides of barns and downtown theaters is celebrating their link to the movie industry, the movie world, to glamour, to Hollywood. And it's been happening for a couple months, and it'll play out for the rest of the year in every corner of the state. So
that's interesting. What other activities are going on?
As I say, we're linking trails and tales. We're trying to do some things that we hand off to the future. One of them that I'm very proud of is we're marking over 7,000 revolutionary patriot graves. We kicked this off a few miles from where you're sitting in a little community cemetery where a wife and a husband are buried next to each other. They moved out here, as so many people did after the revolution, seeking a better life. Ohio, the Ohio land, is what much of the revolution was about: the expansion of freedom, opportunity, and growth. This girl was a teenager, and she was a spy for Washington. She would ride her horse through the British lines unsuspected. Later, she married a Revolutionary War Continental. They moved to Ohio, and they're buried next to each other. That's part of the story. 7,000 plus, never before centralized database so we could market. Other states have been contacting us saying, what are you doing and how are you doing it? We want to do that. They're emulating Ohio Goes to the Movies too. So we're celebrating Ohio and the nation, and we're pretty proud of it. I mentioned the Trails and Tales. Never before was there a tourism related effort to link Ohio's great legacy in aviation and space. The Neil Armstrong Center, Wright-Patt, NASA Glenn, the great research facility in Cleveland, and the other history museums, the Wright Brothers Workshop. They never were linked together before in a way, and weren't talking to each other. So that's just one example of how we're highlighting what's great about Ohio. We're doing that in several instances.
How about natural resources? Anything about natural resources in our state that people might find interesting? You know, as you and I both know, David McCullough, who you and I had a real honor to have met, wrote a book all about the importance of Ohio and the surrounding territory. And, you know, the rivers played such a big role. When I think about Marietta, or I think about Zanesville, or, you know, many people don't think about Lake Erie. And so talk a little bit about, are we thinking about the natural wonders of Ohio, and are they doing this in other states, thinking about their incredible wonders?
Yes, and that's an excellent point. And I've learned in recent years, amazingly, more people visit from in-state and out-of-state Hocking Hills, just 30 miles southeast of here in beautiful Appalachian, Ohio. More people visit the Hocking Hills than they do the geyser. Help me out. The geyser out west.
You mean in Yellowstone?
Yeah, Yellowstone. Can you believe that? And that's because of the natural beauty of Appalachia and Ohio and the Hanging Rock area and the cliffs and the caves and hiking trails. And yes, one of those trails we united links Lake Erie and the Ohio River through the waterways, the rivers, the creeks, the lakes, the reservoirs, and the canals. People forget that New York City is New York City because of the canals in Ohio. What does that mean? Why is it relevant today? New York City, Baltimore, Charleston, Boston, they were all rivals to be the great port of the new United States of North America. It was New York because New York was linked through the Ohio and Erie Canal in Ohio and the Erie Canal in New York down the Hudson River. So that all the great wealth and riches of the Great Lakes went through New York City. And that's why today New York is New York.
Doug, what has surprised you about how people have reacted to this? What's been really interesting to you?
Well, Governor, your listeners of a certain age who have a little bit of gray hair, as you and I do, can remember 1976. And we're reminded that it was a time of coming together, maybe not unlike we hope this can be 250 this year. 1976 was right after the Vietnam War, after the assassinations of the late 60s, campus unrest, so many other things going on, tearing Americans apart. 76 was a coming together, and people can remember that. Wherever I go in Ohio, and my colleagues around the country say they hear this too, of folks of a certain age, that 1976 and those celebrations and commemorations inspired them to get involved in their communities, to go into the law, to get involved in government and politics, yes, for the right reasons. And we're hoping some of the things we do here in Ohio this year, and I hope our sister states and territories, and indeed at the national level, will inspire folks, pay a little bit of attention to focus on civics, the importance of community, and of coming together. I think it's working here in Ohio. We see some evidence of that. And so I knew from the beginning that some people wake up on July 3rd and say, Marge, is something going on this year? Tomorrow's July 4th. So we've been trying to get the word out, and more folks are responding, and I think in positive ways.
Doug, how does the work in Ohio then fit into the national effort? Talk a little bit about how you see it. Have you met in Washington? Have you all gotten together? What are some of the interesting things you've seen in other states?
Yeah, we have been to a number of national conferences and planning sessions. Candidly, I was afraid that we might be dictated of what to do from the White House or the national level. There's actually been a pretty cooperative, laissez-faire way. They've sort of left us alone to do our own thing. And the farther you go west, you can sort of tell the states are a little less engaged, as you might imagine, because their roots don't go as deep as Ohio's and some of the states this side of the Mississippi. But all over the country, I think there is a sense of celebratory coming together. It's not all roses. We know the warts. That's part of this studying history. It's always an effort to do better, to pursue better. We're not perfect. We never have been, but it's time to stand up and say we're proud of how far we've come in 250 years. Think about the future.
Doug, what have you seen that other states are doing that's kind of surprised you, or you learned something that you really didn't know about, something that you've learned?
Well, you mentioned natural resources, and for instance, Colorado, this is their state's anniversary as well as the national anniversary. And so they're leaning in, as you might imagine, of course, out there, they're leaning into their natural resources, the mountains and the outdoors activities, which is such a beautiful state of Colorado. So we're seeing some of the western states doing a lot of that. And of course, in Boston and Charleston on the east, they're reenacting the great battles of the Revolution. And Nationally, we're all reading the Declaration of Independence, but not on July 4th, because most signers actually signed the Declaration of Independence in the early days of August. So that's just one of the sort of myths through time that the resolution was passed on the 4th. Of course, it had been talked about for a long time. That's why Thomas Jefferson was able to spend such time writing and perfecting the Declaration. It was passed on the 4th, but it wasn't signed until August.
Why was that? My understanding is there were a number of people that didn't really want to sign it, and not that they were afraid. It's just that they knew that by signing it, they had committed treason. So some were original signers, and it was all gamed out. Am I correct about that? It was sort of gamed out that we'll all sign on later, but we didn't want everybody being arrested at one moment by the British. Is that true?
The British ended up getting into Philadelphia, but not in '76. So they were not in danger of immediate arrest, but they knew that as Benjamin Franklin said, we must all hang together or we will all hang separately. And of course, we know what he meant by that. So you're right. They knew that they were, in essence, signing their own death warrants. And I think it was more of an issue that they weren't all in the same room at the same time, and they weren't on the run at that point. They were on the run later.
Chairman, what I'm trying to figure out here is you have all these activities going on. So you've got, the Ohio Goes to the Movies. You've got the Trails and Tales and all these kinds of things. Is it all sort of going to culminate to a great crescendo on the 4th of July? Or how have you planned this? As only you can plan, because you are... I've seen you put events together that are just magnificent. So how's this going to work?
Well, you're too kind, but we thought this warranted a year-long celebration. Of course, people are used to the lead up to the 4th, and that being a great moment of, as John Adams himself said, it should be celebrated with pomp and circumstance, fireworks and all that. By the way, he didn't say that about the 4th, because still back then they were, what day should, I think he said the 2nd or 3rd. But this year-long celebration in Ohio and other places every year has a theme month in Ohio. So it'll crescendo in July, but we're going to run through the tape. And indeed, the last month, December, the theme is the future, where we're going to talk about what's coming in the next decade and 50 years. We've got futurists and interesting people and historians. Because the best people to look forward are those who've been able to look backward and kind of predict and speculate about what might be around the unseen corners. So every month, Ohio is a great agricultural state. October will be celebrating all things agriculture in Ohio, and on and on. So yeah, we're going to be having fun, and we've got to have fun. So we're having fun with it too. We're engaging kids, as I say. You get them by having fun, and maybe some of the civic responsibility and the lesson of history rub off. We hope so. We hope the historians sticky moments. Folks in 1976 experienced something that stayed with them and inspired them. We're hoping to create some sticky moments this young folks.
Doug, when you've done a lot of research, I know personally, with your friends, and tell us your reflection on the founders. Tell us about the ones that have captured your attention, and what can you say about their character, their heroism? What do you think?
Yeah, it's easy for all of us to look at these as a bunch of old white men with powdered wigs. Every one of them has an interesting story. These were not accidental leaders. These were committed patriots who knew they were taking a big chance for themselves, their families, their communities. This had never been done before. This was a revolution. And it's important to remember, too, it was a civil war. It's estimated by serious historians, I'm an amateur historian, it's estimated by serious historians that maybe a third of Americans were for the revolution and they were patriots. A third wanted to be left alone, and a third would have been active Tories or in favor of keeping the king and Britain. And so this was a civil war as well as a revolution. It was nasty. It was bloody. It was difficult. And each one of these patriots who signed, all 56 of these gentlemen, and they were all men at that time, had an interesting story. Some of them suffered greatly for it. Some of them lost fortunes, and some of them lost. None of them were killed themselves in battle, but some family members. So it's fascinating. You asked me. There was one. They were all Christians, some deists, all Protestants except for one, Charles Carrollton. He was the lone Catholic, and interestingly too, he was the last survivor. Lived into the 1830s, and was well into his 90s. He was the last signer to live. So, interesting stories.
What was Washington doing around then?
Well, Washington had one of the few native-born Americans with some military experience. Fascinating story, too, that is sort of lost to history, is you can kind of blame the French and Indian War on George Washington because he was sent by the colonial governor west to push back the French and their Indian allies, and he ambushed a group of French, he and his squad ambushed a group of French officers in the woods out this way, and killed a Frenchman, and really arguably sparked French and Indian War, which was the first world war because it occupied European and powers all around the world, India, Southeast Asia, the Americas. And so he had some experience, no experience leading large armies that he would be called upon to do in the Revolution. But George Washington showed up at the Continental Congress wearing his military uniform. Didn't say much, but just his presence advertised that he was available. When you read what he wrote to his wife afterwards, well, they picked me and I told them I really didn't want to do it. He uttered these similar words publicly. I think he protested a little too much. He knew what he wanted to do. He showed up, looked the part, and got the part.
What about the arguments or the animosity, I should say, between Jefferson and Adams? What can you say about? What can you reflect on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was real, and Jefferson was he didn't like direct public confrontation, but he was very good at stirring the pot. Adams at one point would have said at backstabbing and manipulating others to do his dirty work. He was very good at that, and he defeated Adams in the what would have been the fourth presidential election. Twice Washington, Adams, and then Jefferson maneuvered his way in very effectively. It was only when they were both out of public office that Adams made the overture to try to get back close to his old friend, because they had been through a lot together and then a lot together as adversaries during their time in active public service. And then as old men, they did get together, and it's one of the most fascinating collections of private correspondence between these very, very public men that still exist and is studied today. And then, of course, famously on July 4th, 1826, they both hung on long enough as very old men to die on that momentous anniversary. It's if somebody wrote a movie about it, you wouldn't believe it.
Well, Adams lives, right? That was very interesting. What about Abigail Adams? Did she stoke that at all? What's the story on that?
Yes, and I read some of this correspondence recently. She was nobody's fool. She was a tough, smart woman. And by the way, she wrote to her husband and said, "Don't forget the women. We better have the vote, or you're going to have another revolution on your hands." Well, they didn't forget the women, but they didn't include them. We know the flaws that would later be righted in these early documents, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. They didn't deal with slavery. They didn't deal with women's suffrage. By the way, Governor, part of what we're involved in is the putting up of a women's suffrage monument next to, not far from the Holocaust Memorial that you breathed into being some years ago here at the State House grounds. So it's time for that too.
Are you going to get a monument put up then?
Yes, it's already been designed and approved. The 250 Commission is supporting it along with other groups, and it will be erected here in the next couple of years. We had a groundbreaking recently. So it'll be next to just east of the great memorial that you had put up.
So, Doug, just a couple more things here. What do you hope at the end you will have accomplished here?
I hope again that we create some sticky moments for everybody, but particularly young people, to pay attention. We're all familiar with the hand wringing and the stories that people don't study history, people don't, young folks don't spend enough time in civic education. We're trying to spark some of that. We have a fourth grade history pass here in Ohio. I hope some of the other states are doing it too, where fourth graders and their families can go for free to participate in museums and history sites. We've pushed our next generation citizens and education program through middle school and high school programming and educational materials.
You got a lot. You have a lot going, a lot of goals. So, Doug, of all the things that you've done throughout your life, all of the events that you had your hand in, that most, I mean, I don't know of any where you failed. When you think about all these things, where does this rank with you?
Well, very high, again, for personal reasons too. I think it's important what we're doing. I think it's important, as was said by John Adams 250 years ago. This is important. Let not succeeding generations ever lose sight of how important this was. And what a break it was. What an amazing story, and how relevant and resonant it still is today. You can draw so many of the debates in public life today right back to those words in the Declaration. So it's important. And then, of course, there's that personal connection that I'm so privileged and pleased to have, eighth generation descendant. And really, there's a lot of, you do the genealogy, a lot of Americans are descended one way or another from patriots if they do the history, and it's a great history to learn about.
I think we'll leave it there. You said it perfectly. Thanks for being with us today.
It's a distinct pleasure, Governor. Thank you very much.
And see you soon.